Drones. They're not just for hobbyists anymore, not by a long shot. They've become these incredibly powerful tools, giving us this bird's-eye view that promises to make our lives way safer and more efficient. But, and this is a big but, all that power is a real double-edged sword. It brings up some really complex questions we just can't ignore. So let's dive into the promise and the peril of these new eyes in the sky. Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about what it really means to have these eyes in the sky. Then we'll get into how they're becoming this essential tool for modern life. After that, we'll look at the new rules of the sky. Think of it as a digital license plate for drones. Then we'll tackle the tough stuff, the ethics of the unblinking eye. And finally, we'll try to chart a path forward for all this technology. All right, let's kick things off with the most fundamental thing drones have given us, a completely new perspective on our world. Literally. Okay, this slide right here, this is the whole dilemma in a nutshell. On the left, you've got a super useful tool, right? It's just a drone monitoring traffic at a roundabout. Simple, helpful. But then, look to the right. Same drone, same view, but now it's a surveillance system actively tracking every single car. That is the core tension we're going to be digging into. And that brings us to a really key point. We have to stop thinking of these things as just flying cameras. They are incredibly sophisticated data collection platforms. They're loaded with high-res cameras, GPS, all kinds of advanced sensors. They're not just taking pictures. They're creating 3D maps, analyzing crop health. They're totally changing the game of how we gather information. So with that in mind, let's talk about the good stuff, the incredible promise of this technology. How are drones actually being used right now to solve real-world problems? The applications are just exploding everywhere you look. In logistics, they're solving that tricky last-mile problem, getting packages right to your doorstep. For public safety, they're giving first responders a vital eye in the sky during an emergency. They're out there inspecting our bridges, keeping an eye on our crops, and even doing security patrols in giant warehouses. It's pretty amazing. And here's a perfect example of that. Researchers in New Brunswick wanted to study a new roundabout. Now, the old way of doing that would have been clunky, people with clipboards. Instead, they just put a drone up in the air and got this perfect, continuous view of exactly how drivers were handling the new layout. And the results? They were absolutely staggering. After going through all that drone footage, they found a 74% drop in driver errors once people got used to the roundabout. That is the kind of super precise, powerful data that was basically impossible to get before drones came along. And of course, when there's this much potential, a whole industry just pops up around it. You've got hardware giants like AeroVironment building these military-grade machines. Then you have software startups like FlyPix AI using artificial intelligence to make sense of all the imagery. And you even have companies like Drone that are focused on the other side, stopping unauthorized drones. It's become a complete ecosystem. But with this explosion in use, our skies are getting, pretty crowded. And that means we need some new rules of the road, or I guess rules of the sky. This is where the whole idea of a digital license plate for drones comes into play, a system to make sure everyone is flying safely and can be held accountable. The official term is remote ID, and it's actually a pretty simple concept. A drone in the air just broadcasts its own ID and location, kind of like a digital license plate. This lets authorities and even the public identify a drone and see where it is, which is super important if it's flying somewhere it shouldn't be. So why is this such a big deal? Well, the FAA puts it perfectly. They say remote ID is basically the foundation for everything that comes next. Without it, you can't have things like widespread package delivery or drones flying beyond the pilot's line of sight. It's all about building a safe and secure airspace for everyone. So if you're a drone pilot, how do you actually follow the rules? Well, you've got 3 basic options. The easiest way is to just fly a newer drone that has remote ID built right in. Or you can buy a little broadcast module and strap it onto your older drone. The third option is to fly without any of that gear, but you can only do it in very specific FAA-approved zones. You can think of them like designated air parks for hobbyists. Okay, we've talked about the promise. Now it is time to look at the other edge of that sword, the peril. Because this incredible technology raises some really profound ethical questions about surveillance and our privacy, and these are questions we absolutely can't afford to get wrong. This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Drones aren't like a security camera bolted to the side of a building. They can move, they're agile, and honestly, they can be pretty hard to spot. And that completely changes the conversation around what privacy even means anymore. And this This is what that automated surveillance looks like in the real world. That's not just a photo of a highway. There's an algorithm at work, identifying and tracking every single car, creating this constant fire hose of data about where we go and what we do. And that, understandably, raises some major red flags. I mean, first, you have privacy invasion and the lack of consent. A drone can just zip over a fence or peek into a window, recording people who have no clue they're being watched. Then there's the whole issue of data misuse and transparency. Who owns that video? How are they using it? Is it being sold? Most of the time, there's just no way for you to know. And then you get into even scarier territory, like algorithmic bias, where facial recognition systems on these drones might be more likely to misidentify people of color. This is just a completely different world from a regular old CCTV camera. A fixed camera is obvious. It's stationary. Drones, on the other hand, are mobile and sneaky. We have laws about putting a camera on someone's property. The law is still playing catch-up when it comes to the air above that property, and that creates a ton of new legal and social headaches. So, where does that leave us? How do we possibly balance the incredible promise of this technology with all these inherent dangers? Look, there is no doubt that drones offer immense benefits. They can make our world safer, more efficient, you name it. But that power has to come with serious responsibility. If we want to build public trust, we're going to need really deliberate safeguards, clear rules about data collection, real transparency in how they're being used, and just rock-solid privacy protections. And that brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? As these flying, data-hoovering machines get smarter and more powerful, who gets to decide what they see? That's the question that we as a society have to figure out how to answer.